don't know about everyone else, but I definitely feel like I've been to church now. Thank you. That was amazing. So beautiful. My friends, I would like to invite you to imagine ancient Jerusalem. It's springtime, and the rainy season has just ended. The sun is shining, and there's nothing ahead but blue skies. The time of Passover is approaching, and the Israelites are gathering, flowing into the city from the surrounding lands. They're coming together in community to celebrate, to remember, to be together as they commemorate their ancestors, and to praise and thank God. This is the time when the Jews are celebrating their divine deliverance from the ancient Egyptian empire, a time when their attention became even more focused than usual on their current dissatisfaction under the oppressive rule of the Roman Empire. The Roman authorities knew this. They saw the numbers every year at Passover, the numbers of the Israelite communities swelling and growing in Jerusalem. And they feared that the Hebrew people would get stirred up with all the talk about freedom from bondage. So as Jesus was entering Jerusalem from the east, a military cavalry led by the Roman governor Pilate was arriving into the city from the west. Pilate was bringing troops to the city in a show of military might as an act of intimidation against any Jew who might be calling for freedom from the Roman Empire. Roman soldiers marching into West Jerusalem during the high holy days was a show of force meant to intimidate any opposition to their occupation. While Pilate rode into the city on what presumably would be a magnificent steed or on a chariot or something like this, Jesus entered on a borrowed donkey. And his supporters, as well as those folks curious to come out and see this man who they'd heard had recently raised the dead, they lined the street, laid down their coats on the path as Jesus came into town, and they waved palm fronds in the air, shouting, "Hosanna, Hosanna," the Hebrew meaning of which literally translates to save, please. Save, please. Jesus came into town riding on a young donkey. We assume it was young because the text says he specifically asked for a donkey that had never been ridden before. As Carl Gregg writes in his article entitled, I love this name, so that's why I had to say it, Jesus' subversive donkey ride. As Carl Gregg points out, the book of Mark spends 11 verses describing the events of Palm Sunday, and more than half of those focus on the donkey. Well, Jesus tells his disciples that if anyone asks, he tells them, go and find this donkey in the village. Find a foal, a young donkey. And if anyone asks why you are taking the donkey, just tell them that God needs it, and they will return it. The text does not revisit this topic, though, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, because one does end up being left wondering, did they return the donkey? I don't know. Well, according to Carl Gregg, this emphasis on the donkey is to give readers some time to absorb the subtext, the ears to hear, so to speak, the allusion to Zechariah's prophecy from the Hebrew scriptures, which states, "The one who comes riding on a donkey will non-violently bring peace." And when Matthew copied Mark's account of Palm Sunday, he adds in Matthew chapter 21, verse 4, that, quote, "This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet." Then Matthew quotes Zechariah to make clear what Mark is alluding to. This prophecy foretells a peaceful revolution. "O daughter Jerusalem, lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey," the text says. "He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem. And the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall command peace to the nations." This is not just a ride on a donkey for Jesus. It represents a symbolic fulfillment of ancient dreams of Israelite sovereignty, and thus is tantamount to a declaration of independence. That's some pretty powerfully subversive political street theater. And this subversive act, this carefully planned street theater mimicking and practically mocking the Roman military parade on the other side of town, this act, which fulfills an ancient prophecy, it brings a much needed dose of hope to an oppressed people. This peaceful parade gave people something to do together, and they waved palms and they threw down their coats and they shouted together. They did it as a united group. Now, I had never really thought very much about Palm Sunday until I went to work in a Unitarian Universalist church that paid attention to this holiday and even hands out palms during the service, something I had never seen before. The other thing that happened when I went to work at that church was that I learned a lot more about Passover and the importance of the holiday, that holiday in Judaism. This is such an important time of year for Unitarian Universalists because we have the opportunity to engage with both the Jewish and the Christian traditions of our religious heritage. As a UU child growing up, I didn't learn about these holidays. And you'll actually hear a little bit more about that next week when we explore a variety of meanings of Easter, which as a wild hippie child in the woods, I was raised to celebrate this time of year as like a pagan, earth-centered holiday. So for me, springtime is an abundance of holidays. For instance, not only do we have Passover and Easter happening this month, but it is also Ramadan. Many of you know my adult daughter lives in Jordan, so she lives in a Muslim country. And although she's not Muslim, and she's not observing Ramadan in like the traditional sense of practice, which involves abstaining from food and drink, all during the daylight hours, she's pregnant. She would be excused anyway if she were Muslim. But anyway, people spend a lot more time in intentional prayer and spiritual reflection. So what my daughter chose to do this Ramadan month is use it as a time for focusing on her own personal and spiritual practices. She can do this because the entire population of the country is observing Ramadan in one way or another. It is state-sanctioned. And the workday is shortened from 9 to 5 to 10 to 4 for everyone. So now she has 2 extra hours a day for herself each workday. Imagine, I feel like this is something we all need. Another integral part of how many practice Ramadan is by engaging in charitable acts. This often takes the form of collective action to help others. For instance, my daughter's mother-in-law, Maysoon, and her sisters spend the month cooking food and delivering it to needy families. There's something invigorating and life-giving that happens when we get together with the people in our community and we take action. Whether that be cooking food for the hungry, marching in the streets, phone banking, waving palms, or setting up a meal train for a friend whose spouse is ill. During the darkest and most frustrating time of the pandemic lockdown, how many of us craved for a collective, in-person action? After the murder of George Floyd, people took to the streets to demand change. From small towns to our biggest cities and all across the country, people went out in the street and they either marched or they protested or they held fundraiser events or painted Black Lives Matter on the streets. And some did all of this and more and are still doing these things. When we see an injustice, we feel an injustice deep in our bodies, we need to do something. It is in this doing something that we find hope. We feel reinvigorated. We gain the renewed strength to keep going, knowing that when we come together as humans in community to take action for change, we may not make that change happen right away. We may never see that change happen in our lifetimes, but still we need collective action towards positive change. The danger then is when we think we are finished and we've done enough because we did that one thing each year. When Jesus asked his disciples to find him a donkey, he planned out his peace parade into Jerusalem as a subversion of the gross show of military might perpetrated by empire that was happening on the other side of town. He did so knowing he was unlikely to survive the week. When he overturned the tables in the temple, railing against capitalism invading those spiritual spaces, he didn't know if that would actually change anything. It was great theater, though. It made an impression, that's for sure. We're still talking about it 2,000 years later, over 2,000 years later. The eco-philosopher and Buddhist scholar Joanna Macy talks a lot about hope. In fact, she wrote an entire book about it called Active Hope: How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy. In her book, she describes this thing called active hope, which is different from passive hope. Passive hope is about waiting for external agencies to bring about what we desire. I hope somebody will fix that thing someday. Active hope is about becoming active participants in bringing about what we hope for. She writes, active hope is a practice. Like Tai Chi or gardening, it is something we do rather than have. It is a process we can apply to any situation, and it involves 3 key steps. First, we take a clear view of reality. Second, we identify what we hope for in terms of the direction we'd like things to move in, or the values we'd like to see expressed. And third, we take steps to move ourselves or our situation in that direction. The guiding impetus is intention. We choose what we aim to bring about, act for, or express. I add to Joanna Macy's formula the importance of taking action together, especially with our faith community. I want to offer you all an opportunity to engage in collective action for good as a faith community on June 18th. Carrie McAvoy is organizing a group of us to go down to DC to join the Poor People's Moral March on Washington. Yeah. This event will be a generationally transformative and disruptive gathering of poor and low-wealth people, state leaders, faith communities, moral allies, unions, and partnering organizations. It is not just a day of action. It is a declaration of an ongoing, committed moral movement to shift the moral narrative, build power, and make real policies to fully address poverty and low wealth from the bottom up. Woo! Yeah. Do you have a question? Thank you so much for bringing that up. Tomorrow, here, yes, that was my... This is one thing about this community. You will never be allowed to miss something because people will make sure that we all know, and I really appreciate that. Tomorrow, which is April 11th, in the afternoon, starting at 4, I think, gathering near Wall Street, the Poor People's Campaign for the New York State Poor People's Campaign is organizing a march on Wall Street. And I don't know all the details right off the top of my head, but I did see that they're online, and I think that Leonore may be able to chat with folks after the service about that. So maybe even a group tomorrow will like to gather together and engage in this moral march on Wall Street. I hope so. So now, in that light, I have an activity for us all to do to promote hope in our community. So in just a minute, Janet and Leslie are going to pass out a piece of paper and a pen to each person here. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, and I really hope that you will, is to write on a piece of paper your answer to this question: what brings you hope? What is bringing you hope right now? Write your answer, keeping in mind that someone else here today will receive your message of hope. This is anonymous, no need to put your name on it, and you can make it brief, and we will include the choir. So your answer could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be a short sentence. What brings you hope? And for our online worshipers, Errol is going to be facilitating you typing into the chat to Errol what your message of hope is, and then Errol is going to disperse those out anonymously into the chat. So now let's all take a moment while the paper is being passed out to think about this question: what brings you hope? And when you receive your paper, I invite you to use your hymnal maybe as a hard surface and write down your word or phrase. And we will have some music to meditate to on this, and then afterward, they're going to be redistributed. when you're finished, maybe give a little wave, and they're going to come back around with the baskets and collect them. Thank you. Here comes Jill. Logistics. We can do this. I have hope and faith. Thank you. So we're going to mix them all up. Does anyone still have one they need to give? Okay, we've got a couple of folks back there, Jill, on the right. And these will get all mixed up. And then if we can have 2 baskets to come down to pass them back out again after they've been mixed up, then that'll move a little faster. Okay, great. Yay. Thank you for doing this for us, ushers. You're amazing. Extra tasks on Sunday afternoon, right? Okay, so now everyone is going to receive a message of hope from someone in this room. And if by some divine intervention you happen to receive the message of hope that you wrote, well, then there is something special going on, and you surely must have written the message that you needed to hear. So take it deep within you and take it very seriously, I think. Are you folks ready to pass them back out? Okay, great. I'm going to let them come around while I'm talking. I mean, it's fine. We can keep passing them around. They can keep walking around while I'm talking. We're not so formal that can't happen. So, when you receive your message of hope, I invite you to hold this message close. May it be meaningful for you and bring you hope. And know that your message of hope went to someone else in this room. As we heard earlier in the reading by Teresa Nina Soto and read to us by Carrie, in this community, we hold hope close. We don't always know what comes next, but that cannot dissuade us. We don't always know just what to do, but that will not mean that we are lost in the wilderness. We rely on the certainty beneath the foundation of our values and ethics. We are the people who return to love like a North Star and to the truth that we are greater together than we are alone. I, for one, am a true believer that we are greater together, and I cast my lot with you, good people, who, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. May it be so, and blessed be. May you read your messages of hope, and may you please rise in body or spirit, and let us sing together hymn number 368 in your gray hymnal. Now, let us sing.